This year 2020, right now it's June 2020, and it's been quite the year. Been a lot going on. And right now, what we're facing in our culture and our society, a lot of people are asking me, what is our response from a leadership perspective? How do we respond to this? Well, my name is Billy Sanderson, and I have the privilege of working with a group of leaders from all over the United States, all in the context of leadership. And to be honest with you, I think that there are times in our lives where we face situations and circumstances where we might not be able to understand them. And I think that's probably a good starting place, is that there might be things going on in our culture and our society that are not going to be fully understood. They're just not. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a positive response. It doesn't mean that we can't respond as leaders. I think it was Martin Luther King who said people shouldn't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And right now in our culture, we have to look at that. And we have to look at character, because that's what matters. Character isn't formed in crisis in times like this, it's revealed. And what we're seeing is the revealing of character. And I would say that right now there are two letters that probably sum up that description more than ever. The two letters are O-R, or. We're in a culture right now where you're black or white. You're this or that. And unfortunately, if you disagree with someone, they automatically place you in the other camp, no matter what camp it is. And unfortunately, what that does is it generates almost a flood of culture, just like this mighty Mississippi River behind me. It might not look that swift, might not look like it's real powerful, might not look real deep, but the minute you get out into it, you'll be swept away in a hurry. And that's what we're seeing in culture, is that if I have a different opinion than you, if I base my compass true north on something different than yours, then all of a sudden I'm called a name or an adjective instead of trying to bring it together to provide clarity. One of my favorite authors and speakers and mentors from afar, guy's name is Dennis Prager. I'll never forget him saying one time that we can agree to disagree as long as there's clarity. As long as there's clarity. And right now, when this powerful flood is moving, it doesn't bring clarity. As a matter of fact, what happens is it kicks up a bunch of dirt, and it becomes muddy, and it's hard to understand. So instead of this or, mentality, what would it look like if we instead had three letters? And, A-N-D. Because you see, I was a military police officer, and I understand some of the responsibility that goes with that, with law enforcement. Now, why is it that in our culture, I can't say that, I believe that there's been great injustice at the hands of law enforcement who are supposed to uphold and defend and protect, and still at the same time support law enforcement and first responders and paramedics. Why can't I do both? Well, in our culture, if you try to do both, you're thrown into the middle of the swift current of the flood. I think what we need now more than ever is the power of the and. I can look at some of my dear friends who are black, and I can love them, and I can support them, and I can encourage them, and at the same time, I can also look at some movements the floods that bring destruction. And I can say I don't agree with that. I don't. Because what's the end goal of that? What is the end game? Because you see, what happens is when you peacefully protest, that's great, and we should do that. We should have the power of the and. We should be able to go to those who are in leadership, and we should be able to speak and share our feeling. Because you see, what we're missing is true empathy, because sympathy is really agreeing to sympathize with another person, right? And just believing in their cause, whereas empathy is truly feeling what they're feeling. And so there's no other way to do that than to express ourselves positively. And when we have peaceful protests, that's great, and we should do that. Our Constitution gives us that right. However, when it becomes violent, and we begin to light buildings on fire, and we begin to destroy people's hopes and dreams, the very things that they have created and put blood, sweat, and tears into for years, what happens is we're just creating that deep, deep river, that flood that just sweeps, and there's nothing in the end. There's no good in the end of that. Matter of fact, I remember a professor of mine saying that there's never understanding in evil. There's never understanding in evil. You know, when you light homeless people on fire, when you spit in the face of a police officer, or you taunt them into trying to get a response, and you shout at them, and you throw Molotov cocktails at them, and you burn their precincts down, that's just evil. What is the end result of that? It's not positive. Surely it can't be. When you try to destroy sacred monuments and you try to tear down the reminders in our culture of our history, what's the end? What is the end of that? Because you see, what happens is that's the or mentality. Well, either tear this down or you're this, or we're gonna go in and we're gonna steal from all these people that have worked hard and tirelessly, or else. What's the end goal? There is no positive end game to that. And so I would encourage all of us to realize that just because someone is wearing the pressure and the stresses of life well doesn't mean it's not heavy. You know, a friend of mine is a retired Navy SEAL senior chief. And the stories that I hear and the times that I get to spend with him, it's amazing to understand the absolute weight and gravity of what these men have gone through in our lives. So that we can have what? So that we can have the freedoms that we have and we cherish. And you know, I enjoy sitting with a group of men that I meet with regularly at Dunn Brothers in Elk River, Minnesota, over a cup of coffee or hot tea. And just listening to these men who have paved the way, these pioneers of industry, these men who have literally paved the way in nonprofit or in other arenas so that people in my generation could have the freedoms that we have. We need to respect that. We need to honor that. We need to really stand in awe of that. Because that's the power of the and. It's realizing that even though they did it a different way, I still can respect them, and I still can really build what is necessary now on top of what they've built. You know, there are bumper stickers on the backs of a lot of cars that say my child is an honor student at whatever school, and that's great, and that's, you know, we should applaud achievement. But you know what I want my bumper sticker to be for my children? I have young children, and as I engage in discourse and dialogue with them right now about the times we live in, you know what I want my bumper sticker to read about my child? is I want my bumper sticker to say, my child is honorable. Is honorable. Because if I raise my child to be honorable and to be grateful, they're not going to feel entitled, and they're going to respect those who have gone before them. And so a lot of this, what we have to come back to, honestly, is what are we teaching our children? What are we teaching the next generation? Because our children are the greatest gifts we can offer to the future. And we look at young minds today that are so confused because of those two letters, or, because they're being raised in this or mentality and situation instead of let's talk about this, instead of, yes, if you have a grievance, bring it forward and let's let due process happen, because I can support law enforcement and want justice for those who step outside of the lines of their badge. There are bad teachers. Unfortunately, there are. Matter of fact, I would even argue that there are probably volumes of bad teachers, more so than law enforcement. So are we going to create a wave of destruction and start tearing down schools and all that because these bad teachers are literally taking the greatest gift that we have in our culture, the children and their minds, away from our future? No. We bring them in and we try to train and we try to equip and we try to educate. They're bad doctors. And I'm thankful they're great doctors, because as someone who is recovering from brain cancer, I can tell you I'm thankful for good doctors. But I've had bad doctors. I had a surgery that a doctor unfortunately botched, and we had to have another physician go in and repair it. But does that mean that I need to, step in and go after and tear things down and steal from him and all? No, what that means is that we engage in dialogue. And yes, do I want justice in those situations? Of course. Of course. But just because we do that, what we're doing is we're telling our society and our children that we are going to platform the least common denominator in our society. And that never solves anything. When you promote the least common denominator in your culture, what happens is all of a sudden they become the platform. And unfortunately, is that what we really want? Because I don't think that our founding fathers, when they got together and they bled over providing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and they created those freedoms, I don't think that they did so just so that not too far in the future we would see a time in society where we would celebrate those who unfortunately are doing these very horrific things in our culture. What we need now is character more than ever. What we need now is leadership more than ever. We don't need politicians. We need statesmen. We don't need people who have spent careers by getting rich off of lying to their constituents, just saying what they have to say to get reelected. No, we don't need that. We need true statesmen. We need to bring back character, and we need to bring back the integrity that comes with serving others. Because isn't that what it's supposed to be? Isn't that what government ultimately is supposed to do? Is to serve the people? We need to bring back true statesmanship. There's been so many mistakes that I've made in my life. So many mistakes. Matter of fact, there are mistakes that haunt me. There are mistakes that keep me awake at night. There are mistakes that, I wish I could go back and change. But that doesn't stop me from moving forward. I've been a victim in my life. I've been a victim of horrific abuse as a child. I've been the victim of not really knowing a father figure in my life. But that didn't stop me. That doesn't mean that I have to jump in the river and just flow with that victim mentality. No. Matter of fact, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, let alone get a master's degree graduating with honors. See, it's us as individuals. We have decisions to make. And when we jump in the flood and just go with the current and do what everybody else is doing, we jump into the or situation, O-R, instead of and. Because I can live in that moment where I choose to rise above it all. I choose to rise above when everyone's triggered on social media, whenever you make a post about anything. I can rise above that. I can choose to be an example for my children and to discuss with them what it means to be honorable. Because like I mentioned before, one of my mentors from afar, Dennis Prager, he said, unfortunately, what we've done in our culture is we've confused fame with significance. Just because someone's famous doesn't mean they're significant. And what I can do is I can teach my children that true significance is character. True significance is what's in your heart. True significance is following through on your word. True significance is being a statesman and rising above it all and not jumping into the current of the culture that will sweep you into places you don't want to go. But instead, it will, like our founding fathers say, when you rise above it all, you have the opportunity for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let's together rise above it all. Can we get together and just have, discourse? When we disagree, can we at least have clarity? Can we come together and do it? Matter of fact, I teach various leadership academies and courses, and recently I suggested just another 3-letter acronym, ACT. ACT. If we as a culture could just act on it in the right way, we would see a completely different outcome. Because there's nothing wrong with the power of the Mississippi River. It's great. Matter of fact, it creates electricity and it creates various things. It creates opportunity for recreation and fishing, which I love. However, it has to be harnessed in the right way. And so when we act, A-C-T, we do that. The A is to acknowledge. Can we at least acknowledge that there are differences? I think there's beauty in diversity. Why don't we embrace that? Instead of resisting and saying, well, you're either this or this. You know what's great about people who think, well, it's got to be black or white. Well, you know what the reality is? One of the most beautiful creations in all of God's green earth is the zebra. And black and white live together in harmony there. So let's acknowledge that there are differences. And then C, let's have compassion. Can we have compassion in that there are people who are going to see things different than us? That's fine. Let's at least get together and embrace that, because you know what? When different people get together and they embrace things, great innovation comes out. But it takes great leadership for that to happen. So let's acknowledge it. Let's have compassion. And then finally, the T, let's seek truth. Let's seek truth. Instead of just jumping up and down every time we see something, unfortunately, when you can't even know if you can trust the media or not, you have to seek truth in a whole different way. But when you seek the truth, because you're acknowledging that there are differences and you're having compassion for others, when you seek the truth, let me go back to antiquity. It will set you free. And isn't that what we need now more than ever in our culture, in our society, is freedom? We need the freedom again to walk down our street without fear. We need the freedom again to go into a grocery store without fear. We need the freedom again to have those liberties that were bestowed upon us, and to live a life that we all dream of. And that's the American dream. We all want that. So let's act together. Let's acknowledge, let's have compassion, and let's seek truth. Because in that, then we will become the statesmen and stateswomen that our country needs to regain the power of the end.